Good afternoon. My name is Adam Garber, and I'm the Executive Director of Ceasefire PA, the state's gun violence prevention advocacy organization. We believe that everyone deserves a life free from gun violence and are building a movement of partners and citizens to make that world possible. But today, we are gathered here today to discuss proposed legislation that will push that vision further away from the Commonwealth. In every corner of this state, everyone is impacted by gun violence. Each one of us, whether we're mourning the loss of a loved one, living in a state of fear, or impacted by the public health crisis that has only worsened since the General Assembly last passed a gun safety policy 3 years ago. In that time, more than 4,600 Pennsylvanians have been killed. They include the 11 killed at the Tree of Life and associated congregations in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania 3 years ago tomorrow. It includes Pennsylvanians, primarily black and brown people, shot while they go grocery shopping, walk to work, or sit on their porch. And thousands of our neighbors who are in a moment of crisis use a firearm to end their life. The crisis does not end there. There are those who survive a shooting, living with a lifelong injury, and those who are still living with the trauma of loss, the mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, and friends who cannot say hello again to someone they love. I'm honored to be joined by a whole suite of senators and the governor and advocates from across the Commonwealth who are pushing for the Senate to be part of the solution to this problem. Because we're going to need everyone to solve this crisis, but unfortunately the Senate majority continues to prioritize legislation to make our communities less safe. We're here because they are considering a deadly duo of bills moving in Harrisburg. The first, Senate Bill 448 from Senator Langerholt, would allow anyone, including out-of-state organizations like the NRA, to sue a municipality for enacting gun safety policies, and then force taxpayers to pick up the tab. This could stall municipals' efforts to look for innovative solutions to a crisis when they are going to funerals on a weekly basis. And Senate Bill 565 from Senator Dush would allow anyone over 18 to carry a concealed firearm in the state without getting a permit. It is a dangerous bill that has been opposed by everyone from the District Attorneys Association to the PA Police Chiefs Association, along with individual law enforcement officials across Western PA and Lancaster and throughout the Commonwealth. And they came out against this proposal because of the risk to the public and their officers. Dismantling the existing concealed carry permitting system and lowering the age from 21 for carrying a concealed weapon will make it even easier for potential shooters to enter public spaces without any being noticed. These aren't the solutions we need. We need policies to give someone a pause before they take their life, as Senator Fontana's extreme risk protection order does. We need laws to stop the flow of illegal firearms that are fueling homicides, as Senator Tartaglione's bill does. And we need Senator Hughes's bill that will close a hole in our background check system that allows rifles and assault weapons to be privately sold without a background check. The simple fact is, we do not have to live like this. It is a preventable catastrophe waiting to be stopped, and it will take everyone to make that happen. I'm honored to introduce Rabbi Ron Moroff of Hizma Emunah to start us with a remembrance of those who we've lost in this epidemic, including those at Tree of Life. Rabbi?
3 years ago, following the deadly attack at Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, I visited Squirrel Hill to offer support. As I walked along Murray Avenue, I noticed signs in store windows expressing solidarity with the Jewish community. One sign read simply, "Love your neighbor, no exceptions." That same sense of mutual respect and mutual responsibility brings people of different faiths, races, and ethnic groups together following other mass shootings at schools, concert venues, mosques, churches, and other houses of worship. Loving our neighbors without exception animates clergy to stand year in and year out with families of gunshot victims here in Harrisburg and in other places around our Commonwealth. At vigils, we pray and declare that enough is enough and something must be done. Yet words of solidarity and declarations of hope are not enough. We must translate our sorrow and prayers into action, including gun safety reform. There was a time, some of you may remember, not too long ago when people on both sides of the aisle supported such common sense legislation. Now almost everything is politicized and polarized. What will it take for politicians and citizens alike to truly listen to each other's perspectives and experiences and develop a comprehensive approach to combat gun violence. The Bible offers guidance. After the first murder in human history, the Lord asks Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" God's response is simple and timeless. "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Still today, our brothers' and sisters' blood cry out from the ground. What have we done? We are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. No exceptions. What will we do now?
Thank you. We have with us today elected officials who are working to follow what the rabbi just ordered us to do, to ask what can we do to solve this problem. I'm honored to introduce Governor Wolf, who has pushed every step of the way to protect Pennsylvanians from gun violence. As a leader, he's used his power and purse strings to advocate for solutions, increase the sharing of data to track illegal firearms, and push for funding for community violence prevention programs. As he'll tell you, he is doing everything he can. He needs the Senate to join him in those efforts. Governor?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here, and I thank you, all of you, for being here to lend your voices to the call for compassion and as the rabbi said, common sense here in the halls of the Capitol. We are here to demand gun safety reform in Pennsylvania. And gun safety is important for every community all across Pennsylvania because the trauma of gun violence cuts right to the heart of each of our communities. Gun violence is pervasive. It's far too pervasive in the United States, in American life. It's not just on our streets, it's in our schools, it's in our businesses, it's in our homes, it's in our places of worship. It should be in none of those places. And this week we remember the day 3 years ago tomorrow when the anti-Semitic shooter committed a horrific attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. We continue to mourn the lives lost and the lives forever changed on that terrible day. Far too many lives have been taken by senseless gun violence in Pennsylvania all across the Commonwealth. And data shows that the rate of shootings in our Commonwealth has increased over the past 2 years. Obviously, COVID played a role in that increase. But we have to do something about this. That is something that we cannot and must not accept. Gun violence. That cannot be part of our lives. We cannot stand by and do nothing while the threat of gun violence follows children to our schools. We cannot stand by and do nothing while the threat of gun violence follows workers to their jobs and worshipers to their sacred spaces. And that's why I took action. In 2019, I signed an executive order making sweeping changes to reduce gun violence in Pennsylvania. That executive order created the Office of Gun Violence Prevention within the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, as well as the Division of Violence Prevention within the Pennsylvania Department of Health. The order also created a special counsel on gun violence, which studied the problem and created a report with recommendations as to how we can actually do something about that, how we can actually reduce gun violence in Pennsylvania. My administration has invested millions of dollars to support evidence-informed violence prevention programs over the past several years, including a $30 million investment just this year. However, as we know, executive action alone is not enough. It cannot end gun violence on its own. We need the General Assembly to take action to increase gun safety and prevent gun violence. I have repeatedly called for Republican leaders in the General Assembly to take action on four key, these are common sense measures, including creating extreme risk protection orders as a way to temporarily remove firearms from someone who wants to hurt themselves or hurt others. Second, we want to require reporting of lost or stolen firearms within 72 hours. What's the big deal with that? Third, improving safe storage requirements to reduce shootings by children or other vulnerable individuals. And fourth, closing the loopholes in Pennsylvania's background check system. These are common sense reforms. Pennsylvanians are largely in support of common sense gun safety improvements like these. There really isn't much of a debate. These things would cut violence and protect vulnerable members of our communities. They work. But Republicans in our General Assembly are out of touch with what Pennsylvanians want and what Pennsylvanians say they need. Instead of acting to increase gun safety and reduce violence, they have instead repeatedly pushed dangerous legislation that would make all of us less safe, including the two bills, as we talked about, that is now abroad in the Senate. And that's just wrong. That is just wrong. It's incredibly disrespectful to shooting victims and their loved ones all across Pennsylvania. We're here today to ask the General Assembly to stop pushing dangerous legislation and start protecting lives. I again call upon the General Assembly to pass common sense gun safety legislation so that all Pennsylvanians are free to live their lives without fear. Thank you.
We have senators that are leading the way and advocating for solutions here in the building. And we have a number of them with us today. We're going to have a few of them speak. But I want to recognize Senators Comita, Street, Kearney, Haywood, and Collette, who've been working on this, as well as Representative Kenyatta, who is with us today as well. Next up, we have Senator Costa, the minority leader, who is working every day and represents the community of where the Tree of Life shooting happened, but is working every day to make sure we can end this gun violence crisis. Senator?
Thank you very much, Adam. And Governor, thank you for being here with us today and your steadfast commitment to ensuring that we try to do something along the lines of enacting reasonable, responsible gun safety measures. Rabbi, thank you as well, and Adam, and you and the work that you've been doing this period of time. And I would recognize that some of my other colleagues have joined us. I think Senator Capoletti is here. I think Senator Street, Senator Haywood, Senator Williams, Hughes, Carney, Senator Sanacero are all here standing in support of the work that we've been trying to do over the course of the past several years to try to get, as I mentioned, these reasonable reforms in place. You know, we just have to stop and think about the Tree of Life was mentioned, where I used to attend bar mitzvahs and the like, and other events. I grew up 2 blocks away from that community, and I was there the day that occurred. And everybody was this outpouring of support for the things that we needed to do. But before that, we had Parkland, we had the Pulse Club, Sandy Hook, we had Las Vegas, Virginia Tech, and Columbine. We always had that outpouring of support for the folks who were impacted, but we did nothing. And the countless communities across Pennsylvania that today suffer and deal with the anguish of gun violence in those neighborhoods and those communities and the lives that we've lost, the young lives in particular. Gun violence is an epidemic, and it's something that we need to take a look at, and we need to do something here in Harrisburg. There's 2 themes that run through those states, those areas that I mentioned and what's taking place in here. Certainly the loss of lives of loved ones. But the second theme is during that whole period of time, Republicans have managed and controlled this General Assembly. And while they stood there with us, whether we were having events to commemorate the Tree of Life shootings, said that we were going to do X, Y, and Z, and we still haven't done anything. They have failed to act. The things that the governor's talked about that our colleagues have introduced, whether it be relating to the extreme risk order, the reasonable background checks that Senator Hughes has been talking about, whether it be lost and stolen, whether it be some of the other things that Representative Franco and I have been working on in that space, as well as hate crime legislation that is really at the root of some of these issues. Those are the things that we need to be talking about. Up until this week, earlier this week, and I would say last week, and the 2 bills that were referenced, the concealed weapon legislation and the standing legislation, were poised to run. We're poised to run out of committees this week until we stepped up, our caucus, and made an issue of the fact that that's something that we need to be able to stop. And our members put together a series of amendments that we believe postpone things. At the end of the day, it was horrific to me that the week of the Tree of Life shooting, that we were going to consider 2 dangerous, extremely dangerous, and reckless pieces of legislation that would have impacted the lives of Pennsylvanians all across this Commonwealth and across this country ultimately. So I am very proud to stand here with my colleagues to say that we need to act. And we ask the Republicans, now is the time for us to act. If you don't want to act, get out of the way and let those who do want to act get in place. Because if not now, when? Thank you very much.
Since that day, 4,600 people have been killed in this state by guns, a large part of them in our urban communities. Every day in my city where I live of Philadelphia, every week, there's essentially a mass shooting. It just doesn't happen in one location. Senator Hughes and Senator Williams has been leading efforts to reduce this community violence. I'd like to invite up Senator Hughes to talk about his initiatives.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for all those gathered here today. Rabbi, I appreciate you, sir. Appreciate you very much. Keeping us centered on how we need to approach this matter. I'm going to try to make this very simple. Shame on the Republican majority in the House and the Senate, when the simple fact is that 75%, if not more, of Republicans in Pennsylvania support common sense gun legislation. 75% or more Republicans, 84% or more Democrats, 80% or more independents all support common sense gun legislation. Shame on the Republican majorities. Shame on the Republican majorities for not seeing the fact that the people in Pennsylvania want change. They want common sense legislation. Shame on the Republican majority for not seeing the fact that even though we appropriated $30 million of new money for violence prevention initiatives, over $175 million of applications came in. That is an indication that people across Pennsylvania, in every community, want change and they want to keep their community safe. Shame on the Republican majority for not seeing the fact that shootings are occurring in religious institutions, in schools, in hospitals, all across the board. Recreation centers, playgrounds, businesses. Shame on them not recognizing that this is a crisis. Shame on the Republican majority as we get more and more information of the proliferation of ghost guns and how that it is growing dramatically all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, if not all across the nation. The moment has been with us years ago to make change, to do something, to prove that we truly care about the safety and the freedoms of all people in Pennsylvania. The moment is present in front of us right now. Right now. Right now. Shame on them for not seeing and recognizing the humanity of all of Pennsylvania's people and choosing to turn their heads the other way. And as Senator Costa just indicated, and Governor, I know you're aware of this because we work with you closely on this, they were planning to introduce bizarre legislation to make it easier to access and to acquire guns in Pennsylvania until we raised some hell. And when we raised the hell, they pulled back. Shame on them. Let's respond to the will and the wishes of the people of Pennsylvania. They've expressed that. Let's respond, Rabbi, to the humanity of the people in Pennsylvania. They want that. Shame on them. We can do better. We must do better. Thank you very much.
And now I'd like to invite up my own state senator, Senator Tony Williams, to continue.
Governor, thank you for being here. Rabbi, my prayers are with you. To my colleagues, and to many of you who are advocates and supporters of common sense gun legislation, we're grateful that you're in the Capitol today. The sad anniversary of the tragic mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh is a reminder of the increasing incidence of gun violence across our nation and within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Active shooter incidents have increased significantly over the past 2 decades, and despite public outcry, countless vigils where the public pour out their hearts and burn candles in memory of those who are lost, we rather, as a legislature, not burn a moment of midnight oil on finding solutions to this cascade of death across Pennsylvania. For some here in the Senate, Republicans, the solution is easier access and more guns. It's about guns without any accountability or any controls to those in possession of those guns, Specifically, Senate Bill 565 and Senate Bill 448 are suggestions towards an epidemic without a foundation of fact or rationale. Understand, despite the creation of a political narrative or spin that says things such as guns don't hurt people, people hurt people, or this is an attack on the Second Amendment, or frankly, most insulting to persons like myself, this is an urban problem, none of these excuses hunt. And I use and paraphrase it specifically with none of these excuses hunt. The reality is that the richest nation in the world is an anomaly, as stated by ABC News, in comparison to other organized nations with an epidemic of gun violence issues. That means Russia and China and many other nations enjoy a path to civility and economic growth, in part because they control their guns and in fact recognize that we will never do such under the current construct. According to research, gun violence in this country is not led by the mass shootings that capture the headlines, nor is it the daily bloodshed that we witness in the streets of Philadelphia, York, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Erie, and the list goes on. None of the counts of those deaths, none of the totals of those deaths exceeds the numbers of suicides, which are in Lackawanna County, Clearfield County, and many other Republican counties across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The loss of these lives to gun violence is a statement that gun violence does not discriminate. It's not a party affiliation, it's not an ethnic affiliation, it's not a county affiliation. It's simply a statement about the fact that we have not done what is most appropriate and most important in Pennsylvania, the people's work to make them safer. It may be a Jewish worshiper in a peaceful synagogue, an African-American male innocently traveling to his corner store, or a veteran, or a police officer suffering from PTSD. These are the challenges that all of us acknowledge and see on a daily basis in Pennsylvania. While a disproportionate amount of homicides by gun violence is counted within the African-American community, the overwhelming death toll, as by count, in Pennsylvania falls in the white community. The reality is that while many of us here would like to turn our heads on that fact, the truth is this is a Pennsylvania epidemic. And it's gone so long without a count that we've gotten used to the death count, be it on the streets of Philadelphia, be it in a place of faith, or be it with someone who served this nation and protected our liberties and decided, because of the stress of doing that, decides to take their life. The problem does not seek a place where more guns are the solution. And by the way, there are states in this country which have addressed the problem and reduced the level of gun violence. None of those states have done it by increasing access to guns. What they have done is thought in a very thoughtful approach to that process. Senator Wayne Fontana, Senator Tina Taglione, Senator Vincent Hughes, and many of my colleagues have introduced common sense legislation that respects the Second Amendment, but indeed is fact-based and drives safety for all Pennsylvanians. I would hope that we would have to stop coming to vigils, memorials, or press events where we deny the reality of the circumstances, talk past it and give up spin, and get about the people's business. And that's protecting their humanity and their liberties at the same time. Thank you.
You've heard about the widespread support for these sort of initiatives, and it comes from every part of the Commonwealth, including gun owners, who, as you just heard, were often the people we're trying to save. Those gun owners recognize that they can own firearms and we can save their lives from this violence, gun suicide, shootings, mass shootings, you name it. And that's why we're joined by Carol Listowka, a gun owner, a hunter, a lifelong hunter, who is here to advocate for the kinds of solutions that will save everyone. Carol?
Thank you, Adam. I love my country and the freedoms that it guarantees. I've served in the U.S. Peace Corps, worked in social services, and I was a teacher for many years. I'm also a hunter and a gun owner. And I'm here today because I believe Senate Bill 565 is anything but patriotic. It would encourage the irresponsible use of guns and put our most vulnerable Pennsylvanians in danger. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my guns. Growing up in Susquehanna County, some of my earliest memories are of my dad returning triumphant from a hunt. He often hunted with my uncles and cousins, and they shared this camaraderie that I really wanted to be a part of. So in high school, I decided that I wanted to get in on the family excitement and tradition, and so I took a hunter's safety course. Dad gave me my first rifle when I started hunting in 10th grade. It was a .30-30 Winchester, and it had belonged to my grandfather. It's provided hundreds of delicious family meals. Grandpa used to call his gun the meat getter. My great-grandfather's Colt pistol that he used to defend his stock and himself with from rattlesnakes out on the ranch in Wyoming is a family treasure that will continue to be passed down for generations. But I have to tell you, for all the enjoyment and the pride that hunting gives me, I can't say that guns have positively impacted my life. My experience of firearms started in elementary school. On finding a pistol in his dad's truck, a schoolmate decided to see if it was loaded. He shot a hole through his own hand, causing significant damage. My schoolmate survived the encounter with the gun, but not all children are as lucky. Now, this is rural Susquehanna County, remember? My classmate, Rich, wasn't as fortunate. During my junior year, Rich shot and killed his father and then committed suicide with a rifle. He was a quiet kid. He was easy to smile. We sat next to each other in Spanish. Some years later, I lost a cousin to gun suicide. Guns are a part of my family, my life, and my history. They always will be, but I wish I never had to experience the tragic destruction that firearms have wreaked on my loved ones. As a gun owner, SB 565 does me absolutely no good. What it would do is expose our entire population, especially our youth, our most vulnerable Pennsylvanians, to anyone who decides to flex their muscles with a gun in their hand. Now, not long ago, my 10-year-old niece Fatime told me that her greatest fear, 10 years old, is that an active shooter will attack her school. Now, my biggest fear when I was 10 years old was getting shot with spitballs on the school bus. I've worked alongside teachers from Chester, city of Chester in Delaware County, where every single student has experienced gun violence in some form. And I am angered to see our Pennsylvania lawmakers attempting to loosen the current restrictions, exposing our kids to even more gun violence. My own 2 sons are grown, and I'm a foster care mom now. I want to be able to take my kids to the mall, to the grocery store, to a ball game, without worrying that they're going to be shot. SB 565 would turn us all into targets for the next hothead who decides they don't need a permit to carry. As a hunter, I follow a strict personal code of respect for the animal, for the rifle, and towards other hunters. I take pride in what I do, in being self-sufficient and providing food for my family. And my rifles are bound up in that pride. And I know that it's my responsibility to use my firearms responsibly and safely. Permitless carry encourages the opposite of responsible gun ownership. That is why, as a gun owner, a teacher, a mom, and a Pennsylvanian, I implore our elected officials to reject SB 565. SB 565 would strip one of our last remaining protections against gun violence. If you're at home, join me and contact your senator. Tell them to vote no on SB 565. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Many of the solutions you've heard about today and some of the bills that are problematic first start their place in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Sanacero has been leading the charge there to get those solutions out of the committee where we can have an honest debate And if the Republicans don't want to vote for him, at least put him up for an honest vote to see who supports these kind of life-saving initiatives. Senator Sanacero?
Thank you, Adam. Governor, thank you for standing with us today, all of my colleagues and all the other advocates. And Rabbi, thank you for your words earlier. You know, it's amazing, as my colleagues have said, given the gun violence epidemic that is taking place in Pennsylvania right now, the Republican majority solution is to advance bills that will make it easier, not harder, for people who should not have guns to have them. Now think about that for a minute. We've heard about Senate Bill 565. We also know about the bill that would preempt local governments who are trying to protect their citizens from being able to do that. And an array of other measures that will make it easier for guns to get out on the street. Now, as was said before, we're not up here today advocating for taking away people's lawful rights under the Second Amendment and our state constitution. But we are here to say that there are reasonable measures that can be undertaken that will, in fact, save lives. I'm proud to work with my colleague, Senator Hughes, on the background check bill that the governor talked about earlier, a simple bill, a bill that would just close the long gun loophole in Pennsylvania, because that is the only one left. Our current law has that small loophole left, and that's all we got to do to close it. And if you believe the polling, nearly 90% of Pennsylvanians, gun owners included, support that measure. We heard before about, I think it was Senator Williams might have mentioned, suicide and the rate of suicide that happens with guns. The gun safety and bill that I have, and that there's a cognate in the House that would require safe storage. It is a solution that states that have enacted it, it has shown to save lives from accidents, from suicide attempts, and from more lethal intent. These are bills we could pass now. In the summer of 2013, I was proud to welcome Francine Wheeler to the Pennsylvania Capitol. Francine, as you may know, is one of the moms from Sandy Hook in Connecticut. She came to speak at that time in support of the background check bill, which I was sponsoring in the House, and she spoke in the Judiciary Committee of the State House. There was not one dry eye in that chamber that day, not one dry eye. That was 8 years ago. And that bill has yet to be brought up for a vote in either chamber. We can and must do better. I share the frustration of the folks behind me in saying we are tired of vigils. We're tired of coming to press conferences over and over again to do what is common sense. It is time that the people of Pennsylvania rise up and demand better. We need your help. We can speak out on the floor of the Senate, and my good friend Dan Frankel, who has been fighting this fight for many, many years in the State House, can speak up on the floor of the State House. We can try to stop some of these bad bills from moving forward, and we can continue to propose good legislation that we know will have a positive impact. But without your help, without the help of the ordinary people of Pennsylvania to stand up and demand better, it's not going to happen. So let's leave here today with that resolve, that we are finally going to demand and hold those in office accountable who refuse to do the right thing, so that we can finally protect the people in our Commonwealth from this epidemic. Thank you very much.
As the father of a 3-year-old, I have to say, I thought I'd be most terrified about the harder conversations coming when he's a teenager. The conversations about the first person he loves, all the other ones. But the reality is the thing I dread the most is the conversation parents have every day with their kids, which is what it's like after they have to have a mass shooting drill, and God forbid, waiting for that phone call. It's something I didn't have to grow up with. It's something most of us behind me didn't have to grow up with. But Charlotte Borger of Students Demand Action knows exactly what it's like and understands that's why she's in this fight with so many more youth for a safe community, for a safe school, and for a safe world. Charlotte?
The mask got stuck on my earrings. As Adam said, my name is Charlotte Borger, and I'm the president of Great Valley High School's Students Demand Action chapter in Malvern, Pennsylvania. I'm here today to speak on behalf of students in towns, cities, and suburbs of all races, genders, and backgrounds. I am part of the generation who's been growing up with active shooter drills. I'm the generation who has had to spend hours in a lockdown in second grade because, as we learned later, someone near my school was outside firing a gun. But I'm also the generation who has seen the power of the NRA start to crumble. I was here in June to speak out against this bill and another that was before the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and yet I'm here again now that the same bill is in front of the Senate. So much of the work that has been done to keep people safe within our schools and communities is at risk because of this bill. As you've already heard, Senate Bill 448 allows out-of-state organizations to sue cities and municipalities within Pennsylvania who are trying to protect their communities from gun violence. Instead of allowing local governments who know what is best for their citizens to make their own decisions, these out-of-state organizations are able to stop certain laws from being created. To me, this makes about the same amount of sense as someone from Dallas coming in and saying that my school wouldn't be able to wear our Eagles jerseys as a Spirit Day. And by that, I mean none at all. This morning, I had to rush through my economics test in order to be here. With econ on my mind, I've been thinking about the economic profit that will be able to occur for these organizations and their lawsuits, while they're able to sit back and watch our towns and communities be put in harm's way. I may only be a high school senior, but as a teenager, I shouldn't have to be worried about these kinds of things. If this bill passes, it will be because the Pennsylvania State Legislature cares more about what gun lobbyists care about, rather than the wants and needs of so many people within their communities. I'm urging the legislature to vote against this bill in order to protect the students across this state and continue the work that we have done so far. Thank you.
Lastly, we started with one faith and we will end with another. Sandy Strauss is the Director of Advocacy for the Pennsylvania Council of Churches and has been a longtime advocate to end this gun violence crisis. Sandy?
Thank you to Governor Wolf and to all the legislators who are here today and everyone else who is here in support of common sense gun legislation. And thank you, Adam, for inviting me here today. It frustrates me, in fact, it makes me righteously angry that those who advocate for weakening our already weak gun laws keep raising the straw man that we who work to reduce gun violence and promote gun safety are anti-gun and seeking to eliminate gun ownership. Nothing could be further from the truth, but we continue to hear fear-mongering and bending to the demands of those who promote this narrative. And while I choose personally not to own a gun, I should note that my husband is the owner of a legally purchased and permitted firearm, but we both agree on common sense gun safety legislation. I live in Harrisburg, uptown to be exact, and hear gunshots on a regular basis. We experienced a drive-by shooting literally in front of my house 4 years ago when a speeding car drove by, spraying bullets into a basketball court full of youth and kids. It's by the grace of God that only one person was struck, and the injury was not life-threatening. I suspect the shooter did not possess that gun legally. Far too many guns that have been stolen or obtained through straw purchases are in the hands of those who should not have them in Harrisburg and throughout the Commonwealth. We now have two pieces of legislation introduced that would further weaken our ability to ensure the safety of Pennsylvanians when it comes to firearms. SB 565 permits anyone over 18 to carry a concealed weapon in public without a permit, thus removing accountability for those who choose to carry such a weapon into the public square. In other words, we have no way of knowing who's responsible and legally able to do this, raising the potential of the proliferation of guns entering public spaces without our knowledge. The other bill would allow anyone to sue any jurisdiction that chooses to enact gun safety policies to try to protect their residents. I find it interesting that our legislators that resist federal oversight or any oversight and proclaim states' rights take the position that they should remove autonomy from municipalities that are seeking to do what they believe is best for their residents. I would say that's the height of hypocrisy. Local jurisdictions are most familiar with the needs of their communities, and they can be the laboratories for innovative policies to address a crisis that is taking the lives of too many of their citizens. As a person of faith, representing people of faith across the Commonwealth, we believe that we have a responsibility to love our neighbors and to ensure their health and safety. And it's in this spirit that we urge our legislators to reject these two bills and to enact legislation that is aimed at protecting our neighbors from harm. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Governor Wolf. I want to thank all the senators that joined us today and all our other advocates. Government's responsibility, elected officials' responsibility, starts with one thing: making sure their citizens are safe. Because if they can't survive the day, nothing else is going to matter. You've heard we have a crisis in this state. You've heard we have solutions to this crisis. The question is, are we going to debate and move forward those solutions so that we can get to the other issues, because we're not going to lose another 1,600 Pennsylvanians to gun violence? The ball's in their court. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, we can take those too. Yep, Mark.
Governor, this probably goes without saying, but should Senate Bills 448 and 565 make it to your desk, are these bills that you would veto?
Yes.
Any other questions? Mark gets his one answer.